Folks, we're back to Steve Sanson, Jim Jones for Veterans in Politics. Today, our guest is going to be Danielle Pieper Chio. She's a candidate for Las Vegas Justice Court, Department 9. But before we get to our guest, Jim, you have any rants?
Actually, I don't. This week, to be honest, I've been feeling kind of under the weather, so I haven't really been checking the news as much as possible, as much as I normally do. Yeah. So that might be why I'm feeling a little better and I'm calmer, because I haven't been watching the news as much.
But we had some endorsement interviews yesterday.
Yeah.
And we're pleased to announce Jessica Goody took the endorsement for Las Vegas Justice of the Peace Department 6. And Judge Ellie Rahani for Clark County District Court, Department 11, took the endorsement. So congratulations to those two ladies. They'll make a fine jurist. And before we get to Danielle, Danielle has also been endorsed by Veterans in Politics. So we want everybody to go out and vote for Danielle as well. But
thank you.
You're welcome. Miss Chio. Is that right?
Chio.
Chio. Tell us about yourself.
So I was born and raised in Honolulu, Hawaii.
Oh, boy.
I know. Everyone asked me why I came here. I'm like, it's the 9th island. Why wouldn't I come here? I went to college at Whittier College. After college, I kind of needed time to figure out what I wanted to do. Worked in the LA Unified School District for a little bit, not as a teacher, as a teacher's assistant. And then I volunteered at the Child Abuse Services team. That's a multidisciplinary facility where essentially everybody comes together. So let's say if a child said that they've been sexually abused, police get called, they bring the child to our facility. There's a nurse that does an exam. There's CPS, therapists, social workers, and I was there as a volunteer. That's when I saw what a DA sort of does, or a deputy district attorney at that time. Did the interview, I saw the police, and I kind of thought, you know what, that's what I want to do. And then they said, you have to go to law school to do that. I was like, I'm a terrible student. Why would I ever want to do that? Went to law school. And then my mom and I actually went to law school at the same time. My mom my mom went to law school at Boyd. And I went to law school at Sacramento, McGeorge School of Law. Okay. So every summer I came back and I worked here. And I wanted to actually, when I graduated from McGeorge, go back to LA because it's in Sacramento. And at the time, Gray Davis was getting recalled. And it was a terrible time to get a job as a new attorney. And so I moved here and I got a job.
Who's Gray Davis again?
He was the governor of California at the time, I think around 2003.
Yeah, he got recalled and that's when
Arnold took over.
Yeah, that's when Arnold took over.
Yeah.
So, but he didn't take over before I graduated. So then I moved here, got a job at the city attorney's office, did that for 2 years. And then I moved on in 2005 to the Clark County District Attorney's Office. Okay. And then I was on the sexual assault unit. So I got to realize my dream in 2009 of doing why I came into this profession. And then in 2010 till now, I've been on the gang unit. And in 2012, Steve Wolfson made me the team chief of the gang unit.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you.
But didn't Metro get rid of the gang unit?
Metro got rid of the gang unit because essentially they were not hiring for 5 years. There was a moratorium on them being able to hire officers. What that in effect did was leave your patrol unit short. So the way to deal with that essentially was to get rid of some units, some detectives units, and then put them all back, not all back in patrol, but back in the area commands. Because essentially Metro is built on patrol, area commands, and then you got your specialized unit. Okay. So then when they were able to come back after a year and a half, we put their gang unit back together. And then I sort of worked with them on that. And then now the gang unit is back together.
Are there many gangs here in Clark County?
Yeah, of course you would ask me that when I didn't bring that paperwork, Steve.
No, we had Danielle Sauter. I don't know if you know her. She is, she was a candidate for Nye County Sheriff. And she was undercover in the MS-13.
MS-13, in Chicago.
Yeah, and that was a very fascinating interview.
Yeah. I would say, so Nevada first started what's called hybrid gangs. Part of it because at most, gangs essentially back in the day when we talk about, different movies, colors and things like that, based on territory, colors, location. What happened is we essentially got rid of those, housing, and we essentially spread people all over the valley.
Okay.
Well, when you do that, gangs they kind of grew and their ideology changed. So instead of being in one area, they suddenly were spread out on the valley. And so what they started to do was you would have Blood and Crip members that were going to the same school, but they didn't have anybody else there that sort of did the kind of things or believed in what they wanted to do. So they now clicked up and then they started their own little gang. So we started having what was called hybrid gangs, which was, kind of...
Let me stop you right there for a second, because that reminds me of something. I remember when I was reading about this one individual wanted to be part of the Hells Angels. Mm-hmm. And they didn't let him in because of the color of his skin. And he went out and created the Mongols.
Yes. And there you go. And so that's what happened in Nevada, mostly in southern Nevada. And so law enforcement at first was confused, right? Because we're like, that guy's a Blood, that guy's a Crip. Why are they hanging out? Mm-hmm. Maybe committing crimes together, getting involved in different things. And that's when we realized, as we learned more about it and studied, that that's what they're doing across the valley. So then we had to change the model by which we investigated crimes. We couldn't only go by what we did before. And so there are a lot of gangs in Nevada, but they kind of click up. Sometimes they don't. And a lot of them are getting more violent and they're younger.
How young?
Well, I would say we have, I've prosecuted people that were 13, 14 years old, right? So they have to come into the adult system. Sometimes we send them back into the juvenile system. And it's sad, right? Because when you get on that life of crime, unless something diverts you and changes your mindset and your understanding about what you believe you're about to do, they're going to continue in that lifestyle. So that's one of the reasons I decided to run. Look, I'm a hardcore prosecutor, right? Talk to most people, but I also think I'm reasonable and fair. The other part of what I wanted to do is I realized I was personally prosecuting younger and younger people.
And let me stop you right there a minute, Miss Chio. Chio, correct?
Yes.
I should know that by heart, right, Jim? Psychologically speaking,
yes,
they say males their mind is not fully developed until they're 30. And women, their mind is not fully developed until they're 25. So women has a 5-year maturity growth on men. So how do you feel when you have a 13 or a 14 or a 16-year-old? And there are many times 16-year-olds and 15-year-olds, they charge them as adult, depending on what the crime is. How do you feel that prosecuting those younger folks that commit heinous crimes?
It's sad, right? There's no other word for it. It's devastating, even as a prosecutor, to realize that the person that is standing, I would say, on the other side of the table, right? Because when you walk into court, there's 2 tables. It's sad and devastating when you realize that the person that has committed, as you would say, a heinous crime, on that side of the table is, under 18. Let's just kind of give that. Under 18 years of age. And so I think as a prosecutor, you have to take that into account, right? My life experience helps me, and my 19 years in this profession helps me in making some of those decisions. So I ask questions, right, of the defense attorney. What's their family life back? Let's, background like. Let's look at, what resources were available to them. And, do they have a juvenile record, or is this like a one-off where they made a really, really bad decision? It was a, bad day. I don't know, maybe their girlfriend broke up with them or something like that. What are the circumstances that led to this? I think you have to look at that. But, you have to balance everything, right? Because there is another family on the other side of that may have lost a loved one. So recently I had a case where there were 2 males and they were fighting over a female.
However, I'm out.
That never happened.
I mean, you did say that women mature 5 years faster.
However, I mean, when I was in my 20s, I'll probably be the one. But when you get older, you're like, take her.
Yeah. So, it was devastating because I had one side of the family where he was 20 years of age. I had the other side where my victim was 17. And you have 2 families in the courtroom that are devastated by the decisions of both individuals, right? Because it's I'm sure, as you can imagine, it wasn't all one-sided. And so there were opportunities where the person charged could have made a different decision. There were 2 or 3 opportunities, but he chose not to. And that was devastating to his side of the family, but also to the other side. I mean, you equally have sides that are torn apart by it, but one side will never see their loved one again because it was a murder case. And that was a case that was difficult. And what we ended up doing and what I explained to the family is, look, I can never give you the justice that you deserve. While we call it the criminal justice system, that will never happen. Every holiday from now on, every day from now on, you are no longer going to have your son. And I can't make that whole, even though some of that is the goal of this of the system, as we call it, right? In civil, you can do that with money. But I don't think at that point, any amount of money is going to console you for the loss that you have. And so what we can do is try to bring some justice and closure to some extent in this system. Because going to court every single year, 3 or 4 times a year, just kind of rips that wound open, right? There's no satisfaction that you get by dragging a case out for years and months. Sometimes we have to do that. That's what the system demands. But in this case, I felt that we could maybe negotiate it, that we could come to some resolution so that my victim's family could heal. But also the other side of the V, as I say, right? Because it's state of Nevada versus, and there's a name on the bottom. That side could also process and heal and move on in their own way. Because nothing is helped by all of us screaming and yelling at each other in the courtroom. I think we came to a good resolution. I think the family at the end was happy, even though they're devastated. And my hope for them is that they heal and move on to a better place.
Do you remember Governor Kenny Gwynn?
Yes.
Okay. Long time ago, while he was governor, I went into his office in Carson City, and we were discussing several things. And one of the things that we were discussing was criminal justice. And I asked him, I said, Governor, I got this new proposal for a new law. And he goes, okay, Steve, let me hear it. And I said, it's called family justice. I said, Governor, when somebody takes your loved one, whether it's rape or murder, the family feels that they need to do something. They need to have some type of closure by having, quote unquote, revenge on the family. I said, wouldn't it be cool to have a law? And you're going to think that I'm probably crazy for saying this.
I'm like, if we're going in the UFC way, this is going to go sideways quick.
But everything happens from an idea, right? And many people say it's crazy, and then when the idea is passed, everybody adapts and they love it, right? I said, wouldn't it be cool to have a law that the family would feel like they personally did justice, they personally revenged their loved one? And he goes, how would that work? I said, okay, Governor. I said, the accused that is actually convicted, the evidence is pointing that this person did the crime, no doubt that this person did the crime. The family have an opportunity to pick a member of their family and go in the room with the accused, and whatever happens, happens. He looked at me, he goes, I don't think Nevada is ready for something like that. All right, Governor. I said, I just wanted to put that on the table because I'm the type of guy that I like to think outside the box. Yeah. I'm not the sheep follower. I like to lead, and that's one of the things I brought to Governor, and he didn't think that was good for Nevada at the time.
I'm not sure if that's good for Nevada. But it's the concept. Your concept is that family that has been victimized wants to feel, that's where it gets difficult. And in gang cases, that's difficult because now they want to level their playing field. And, in most of the gang cases, we're never going to be able to figure out where the first disrespect happened to now we're in the 20th shooting. That was a sad case because they were, that's the difficulty with gangs, right? When you're in that lifestyle, it seems very glamorous. I don't know why, because it's not. It's not. What I've said to defendants when I can speak to them is your life may be over.
Well, it's glamorous because their mind is not developed.
That's right. It's also glamorous because it seems like you're an outlaw and you're doing what you want and nobody's telling you.
Tough guy.
Yeah, and you're like, well, you actually have to work because nobody really hands you money right off the bat.
Right.
You have to live within society's rules because living outside of them by being violent and making violent choices doesn't lead to a good outcome.
Could you explain what the Justice of the Peace does?
So the Justice of the Peace essentially is, I call it your first appearance court. So we handle certain matters. If you have been arrested, you're going to have your initial appearance in Las Vegas Justice Court or Henderson or North Las Vegas. That's when you're first going to kind of hear what the state is charging you with. At the initial appearance court, bail is going to be your big issue, which is why that is the big issue in Justice Court. Then essentially you will go on to a formal arraignment where you will receive the charges, you will be given the charges, and you're going to hear what the state is formally bringing against you. Within 2 weeks of that, if you're still in custody, is a preliminary hearing where the state has to show by slight or marginal evidence that you committed the crime, and we have to have somebody identify you. Once that is done, you then go on to district court, which I call the law and order court, right? The trial courts that we normally think about. Justice Court also handles misdemeanors, so misdemeanor battery DVs as well as DUIs. DVs, now battery DVs are handled by jury trials, or you can have a bench trial. DUI, you can have a bench trial, but the same sort of process. Whether there's a preliminary hearing, you get arraigned on a misdemeanor. Justice Court also handles status checks. This is all on the criminal side. Then you get on the civil side, they handle landlord-tenant, protective orders, as well as civil matters under $15,000.
Okay, well, a very good explanation of that.
Thank you.
Because I ask it all the time.
Yeah.
I try to, when I'm in court, I try to explain it to my victims because most people are kind of lost. They just think it's a court system. They don't realize it's sort of broken up and what am I doing here and why am I here and why do I have to come? And if you come from California, you're completely confused.
How long have you been a prosecutor now?
19 years.
I'm going to steal one of Jim's questions because I know he's going to ask. That they say a public defender is more lenient, and once they become a judge, they're more lenient on the victims. And somebody that was a prosecutor and become a judge, they're more jail time. Jail time. How do you feel about that observation?
I don't think that's true. I actually think sometimes it's the opposite. Sometimes I think defense attorneys, especially if you're an experienced defense attorney, you've heard it all before, right? You've dealt with the process. You understand the nuts and bolts of it. We all do, as long as we've been working in the system for over 10 or 15 years. I think defense attorneys take no BS because I think they sit there and they think, I've heard this before. I understand the excuses that you're making and I understand what your attorney's doing. I think most prosecutors or judges that were prosecutors are harder on prosecutors because I think their mindset sometimes is, I wouldn't do it like that. I've been in your shoes and I wouldn't make the same decisions that you're making. I think for me, as a judge, it's not an extension of what I've done for the past 19 years. It's a totally different position. My goals and what I need to accomplish are different. As a prosecutor, you're an advocate. As a jurist, you're not. Right? As Stu Bell famously used to say, you're calling balls and strikes. You're the referee. You're not an advocate. And so you shift positions. And I think that's what would change for me. But that's what I think about.
What do you look for when you remand? Because that's what you're going to do as a justice of the peace, remand people to district court because you found them to be, there's enough evidence there to have a guilty verdict or whatever. I don't know exactly what the mindset is on that, but what do you look for when you remand somebody over to district court?
I think at a preliminary hearing, essentially all you're looking for is probable cause, which is slight evidence that this person committed the crime. So let's say we're talking about a murder, right? The elements of the murders are unlawful killing of a human being. So you have somebody from the coroner's office who's going to testify the person is a human being and they have identified them. And then you have to show that it's an unlawful killing. Unless there are self-defense issues, that's pretty basic. I think that's where people get a little bit confused. It's not a full-blown trial. It's just a probable cause determination.
Explain self-defense.
So self-defense, when you read the laws of self-defense, essentially you can defend yourself. But the force that you can use has to be the same force that is coming at you.
Somebody broke into your house, middle of the night, you get up and you see a shadow.
Okay. What am I going to do? Well, what am I personally going to do is probably different than what my husband's going to do.
You're going to talk to him. Husband's going to beat the living crap out of him.
So I think, look, in that case, can you use deadly force under the law, right? If somebody is breaking into your house and they're doing you harm, so you're not protecting your property, but your life, then I think you have the options to use deadly force. That to me is more clear cut. Obviously, we've had situations where wives have set up a husband or a husband has set up a wife. That's not the situation I assume you're talking about. Where most people get confused is where there's a fight. So what I've explained to people is, in a fight situation, if you and I are going to fight and we're only using our fists, you can't just pull out a gun and shoot me, because that's not the same force that is coming at you. That's where people get confused, right? Self-defense, the other thing people forget in a murder situation, is in self-defense, you are saying, yes, I intended to kill you. Because that's why I'm having to use that force. It's very tricky and it's very technical, but that's what most people don't understand about self-defense, right? Because you're not saying, oh, by accident I pulled a gun. You're saying, I pulled the gun, I pointed it at you, and I shot you.
What happens if you're outnumbered, or the guy or gal is way bigger than you, or you know for a fact this person is an expert in whatever, boxing, judo, whatever, and you pull out your weapon because you don't have those talents to deal with them at that same level?
Are you trying to get me in trouble before I become a judge? This guy.
Yeah, a lot of hypotheticals.
I'm just throwing hypotheticals to see.
you
know what? There's a lot of people that really want to know these things.
Oh, I know. I'm giving you a hard time.
And I think people are confused. Because I think most situations that I'm dealing with, it's where people in a fist fight bring out a gun. And it's very hard for them to understand that you can't do that. Because we don't want, the law is meant to have a safe community. You don't want people constantly taking the law into their own hands, because the justification then goes all over the place, right? The public policy is, look, we don't want you to be a victim and just, stand there while you get beat down. We also don't want the opposite. People
Could you stand your ground here in Nevada? I know that you could do it in Florida.
I
think it depends on the scenario you're in, Steve. I think it depends.
Doesn't it kind of all just go back to, and I don't mean to interrupt you, but you're bringing up some good points. One of our members, I looked it up. I can't remember the exact states because it's been a while, but certain states have what they call mutual combat laws. But one of the things, and he's asked that question to judicial candidates before, and basically what every one of them has said, well, we're not really sure, because even if you and I are going to fight and supposedly we have this pre-arranged thing, right?
Yes.
No one's going to pull a weapon. No one's going to pull a knife.
Yes.
Let's just get it on or whatever, right? But then something happens to where, okay, so the other guy gets knocked out, and this other guy, instead of stopping, literally stomps him into the curb or something.
Then that's excessive force.
That's excessive force.
Yeah. Then what happens is, so that's where the law is always. You have to look at the situation. Yeah. So the initial thing is, okay, we got into a fight, right?
Yeah.
Now let's say I knocked you out. Yeah. Because my brain's more developed.
What happens if
your brain's more good?
What happens if you kill him by a punch, by a strike? Because that happens a lot.
Yes.
If Steve hit me, that probably happened.
and the person is dead, but you didn't use any weapons.
Yes. Listen, the district attorney's office has charged those situations, but a lot of it is, in the situation I saw that was on the Strip, right? There were a bunch of racist things being said to the victim. So that shows a little bit more intent, right? So you have to look at the entirety of the incident, what happened, the actions that led up to it, the actions as it's happening. Because there may be a situation where we're just fighting, it's mutual combat.
Right.
And then one thing will change, which is I knock you out because my brain's more developed. And then essentially I don't stop, right?
Yeah.
I continue.
Yeah.
So now my actions have gone above essentially a self-defense or mutual combat, right? Now I've taken it to a different level that it didn't need to be. So that's where I think it's important as a prosecutor to know and understand those facts, because we make the charging decisions in this, at least in Clark County.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does. It does. But
Is he setting himself up for something?
No.
I'm kidding.
You know, what happens when because provoking a fight is what normally gets people into a fight.
I agree.
What happens? Somebody, words are words, right?
Yes.
You're this, you're that. That's,
Right.
I don't think a judge is going to say that's enough for you to go up to somebody and
Yes.
hit him or her. But what happens if they spit on you? Is that more of something that one needs to defend themselves physically because of that?
It depends, right? So if you spit on me and I pull out a gun and I shoot you, that's we've gone beyond. If you spit on me
and you take off your rings and take your earrings out, take your high heels off, and you're like, come on.
Yeah, right. But if you spit on me and I pull out a knife and I stab you, right? That's a little bit closer to what are we having here? Was it necessary? Was I afraid? Was I all of those things? So I think the size of the two people, you may take into account. Where are we? Are we, out in the middle of the desert, there's nobody else? Or are we at your house where you have a bunch of friends that may jump in and assist you? I mean, all of those things are things that as a prosecutor, when you're making the charging decision and or when you're making the decision to negotiate a case, you have to look at. Because those are all factors that are going to come before a jury. I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, we call a jury trial a search for the truth. All of those facts may or may not, it all depends on what happens, may or may not come out. So as a prosecutor, my duty, I believe, and the oath that I take is to uphold justice. And so what does that mean? Depending on who's on the other side of the table there or the bottom part of the V, that's what I look at when I'm negotiating a case. If you have a 15-year-old versus a 50-year-old, you look at the 50-year-old like, what are you doing fighting with this kid, right? Like at some point you got to be mature and back off.
There is also senior citizen laws, right?
Yes, there is.
65.
Yes, you can, it's an enhancement.
Felony.
Yes.
It's a felony, right? If you hit somebody over the age of what?
I think it is 65.
65.
Then it's enhancement.
Oh, we
right?
can't mess with Robert Foster.
Wow.
Dude, how long you been with the prosecutors? I'm asking you these questions and I want to make them tough. And the reason why I want to make them tough is because you're going up against an incumbent.
I am.
So you have to rise above a little bit more than, it's not like you're running against Joe Blow attorney.
I'm just running against Let Him Go Joe.
You run against an incumbent. So the incumbent always have
the advantage.
So
it's like a boxing match. You're fighting against the champion. You got to beat the champion.
Like Mike Tyson and Buster Douglas. Who would think, right?
Right.
So people want to know that you're more here and you way surpass the incumbent. So I asked these questions. Right. And I remember, how long you been with the prosecutor's office?
I've been with the DA's office since 2005.
Okay. When was David Roger there?
He was there in 2005 till 2011, because Steve took over in 2002 October. So I think it was 11-ish or maybe the beginning of 12. David left.
So we had David on the show.
Okay.
This is like years ago, and we were asking him about home invasions.
Okay.
And I remember he sat and he said, "Well, this is what you do." He says, "Name facts. Fact, I was awoken by a noise. Fact, I went and got my 9mm. Fact, I went downstairs. Fact, I saw a shadow. Fact, the shadow advanced on me. Fact, I shot the shadow." He goes, "Don't say that, my daughter had an argument with her boyfriend and I thought he was coming in the house. I had an argument with my neighbor and I thought that he might break in." Don't put scenarios there that doesn't matter. Always say fact.
He's right.
So that would be a legitimate self-defense right there.
It might be, but I'm like, I don't want that to happen. And suddenly like, Danielle.
Yeah, right.
I mean, look, we actually had, I was actually watching, I don't know if it was I was watching TMZ, and they had a Ring doorbell video where a boy broke into a family's house because his ex-girlfriend lived in the house and he was trying to get in, and the father shot him. And it's all on Ring doorbell. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I remember that, yes.
And it's very graphic. I actually think you shouldn't release that. I don't think most people are ready to see that.
My home, and I'm going to be blunt, I have security on every single, I have like 3, 4, 5, I have about 6 different doors to my house. I live on half acre. And I have security on every single door. I have a wall, okay? I have cameras all around. I have motion. So my thinking, if somebody was to break in my house, it's not to rob me, because a robber always wants to break in a house that's an easy mark, right? They're not going to break in a house that has all this security
Cameras
stuff
all over here.
Wouldn't that be a fair assumption?
You may be giving some of the people that commit home invasion just a little bit too much credit. But I'm just being honest with you.
Stupid.
Listen, there's a reason why the criminal justice system has never gone away.
Because there's always crime.
Because there's always crime.
There's always a stupid person in the bunch.
I didn't say stupid.
Have you had the opportunity, because you're going to be judge and you're prosecutor, and I'm sure that you've put people away.
I have.
Okay. Do you practice in Las Vegas Muni as well?
No, I did when I first started.
Okay. So have you practiced in any Muni?
Yes, from 2003 until 2005, I was in Las Vegas Municipal Court as a prosecutor.
Okay. Have you had the opportunity to visit the Las Vegas City Jail or Clark County Detention Center? You have?
Yes.
That's impressive.
I don't go to the jail anymore. I used to go there for different reasons, but what happened is, when I started going there, word got out really quickly that I would be there. Mm-hmm. And so people, as you know, the jail has their own gossip system. We're trying to figure out who is snitching. So they're like, who's Pieper prosecuting and who's snitching? So
who's the rat?
I made the decision, even though I may not have even been going to the jail for anything related to a case.
Right.
But I've been to the Clark County Detention Center probably 4 or 5, maybe 6 times. I've been in the tunnels. I've been up to the prison, High Desert. I've been up to Ely. I actually went into the death chamber. So I've seen that, because I think it's also important that as a prosecutor, if you're going to, seek the death penalty or that you see essentially where you may be housing people. I think it's because of that and what I've done, my maturity, where I am in my life. I also think that we have to have different alternatives, right? So my goal when I win is to start a court for kids, and I call them kids, even though they have to be in the adult system, that are young, that essentially we can work with to try and divert them into a different way. A lot of people use the word wraparound services, so I don't want to keep saying that. But I was raised by a single mother. My father was an alcoholic and a drug addict. He was extremely violent with my mom. So it's not like I don't understand.
He was an abuser?
He was an abuser. And I think that helped to shape who I am today. I was not a kid that listened very well.
Did you bring bias to the bench based on that?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think so. My mom, as the story goes, grounded me for a whole year, 3 months at a time, because I couldn't understand what the words "be home at midnight" meant.
You're a bad girl.
I was a bad girl. I was a very bad girl. Don't Google me in Hawaii. Just kidding. I'm kidding.
Danielle Chio, Pieper, Hawaii.
Yeah.
Oh, heck, look at that.
I'm kidding. But I was a bad kid, right? So it's like, for me, I look at the system and I'm like, look, if I didn't have somebody like my mom who imposed discipline and structure, I'm not sure where I would be now. And I'm sure there were times when she was exhausted and tired and didn't want to do it and was like, what is wrong with this kid? But she loved me enough to do that. I think now we have different family structures. They're more fractured, right, than maybe, the 1950s and 60s. While the court system may not want to take on that role, we have a responsibility to this community. And so for me, that's what I want to get involved with. Because people are afraid to work with violent offenders. I understand it.
When I look at judges, I place judges to a higher standard than I would a public administrator, an assemblyman, or any one of those politicians, because judges affect your life immediately.
True.
On a very, very personal level. A president probably will affect your life 4 years from now. Probably not even in office. And that's when your life started getting affected somehow. But a judge is immediate and personal. And they have to go by the judicial canons.
Yes.
Do you remember an attorney named Alexis Plunkett?
I do.
Okay. And, she got convicted of bringing cell phone in and had the client use it, which was a no-no. Would you turn in attorneys that break the law?
Would I, as a judge or as a prosecutor?
As a judge. Would you turn in attorneys that break the law, that violate canons, that violate ethics? Would you be that judge to make sure that everybody is on the same playing field? It doesn't matter if they're a jurist or if they're a judge, or if they're an attorney or if they're a defendant, plaintiff. Would you? Yes,
because I think when you have attorneys who have a special place, right, it's an adversarial system. When you have adversaries doing things like that, there's a problem, right? One of the things that's important about the criminal justice system is trust in the system. And if people can't trust that the attorneys are following the rules, then why should they?
People have a problem trusting our electorals right now.
That's another show for another day. That's an after-election show.
After-election show.
But you can't have attorneys breaking the law and they're not held accountable. It's not fair to everybody else in the system that has to be held accountable for the actions that they take.
How about abusive process, when attorneys abuse the process?
What do you mean by that?
I call it throwing crap against the wall and see what sticks.
Some people would call that something else.
Well, a lot of times attorneys, most times, as far as my experience, attorneys file a ton of stuff and they never seem to get called vexatious, which is a term that's more thrown around in family court constently.
Which is why I've never practiced in family court.
which is the reason why a lot of people don't blame me.
Here's the thing for me. I don't have experience with that, right? Because I think what you're mostly talking about, it sounds like, is mostly in the civil system as opposed to the criminal system, right? Because
I think those two get confused sometimes. Civil judges lock up litigants.
So I've never, in my experience, I've never seen that, right? I've done death penalty cases, and there's a lot of litigation, and as there should be. Yeah. The state is asking for the ultimate punishment. You should question what I'm doing. You should challenge what I'm doing. The burden is on me. It should be like that. I welcome that. But in regard to the vexatious litigants and I just don't know about that, because that's not my experience, and I've never practiced with somebody, I think, like that. I mean, if civil people cross into criminal, they usually do a little bit of that, but usually the judges are like, what are you doing?
So is Department 9 just criminal, or is it
right now it's criminal, because it's just Las Vegas Justice Court. So they have their own civil judges. They kind of split. There's 3 civil, and I think the rest are criminal.
Okay. Back in 2008, Veterans in Politics worked with Judge Jennifer Elliott. Mm-hmm. And Barbara Buckley was the speaker back then, I believe, for the assembly, and had a law passed called Veterans Court Treatment, Veterans Treatment Court, and Jim Gibbons signed it into law. And veterans in politics advocated for it here in Southern Nevada. How do you feel, what's your perception on Veterans Court? Because throughout the years, they changed it. Before it was that judges shall have veterans go into Veterans Court. And then they try to change it to may to give the judges an opportunity they can or they can't. And there was no monies for Veterans Court. Veterans didn't have to pay. And now I found out the other day that they do have to pay for the Veterans Court, which I think is absolutely ludicrous. But how do you feel about veterans entering the Veterans Court? And, you know, there's some veterans out there that do some stuff. But it's just like I explained to a lot of prosecutors. You know, you have a police officer that draws his weapon and fires it, and they're automatically placed on administrative leave, pending psychiatric evaluation to see if they're fit to go back on the street to serve and protect. A veteran who's in combat, search and destroy missions, a lot of them, and they're in the fight every single day. There is no downtime. There is no psychiatric evaluation. And then you expect them, when they come and leave the military and they come back, and you expect them to turn it off. But they can't. And they do bad things, some of them. Mm-hmm. So what's your perception on Veterans Court? And it's like I told the Trump-Pence administration when Mike Pence came out here years ago in Henderson. And I said, what is the Trump-Pence administration going to do with the 140, at that time, I think it was 145,000 veterans that was in state and federal prison? Instead of incarcerating them, what are they going to do about treating them? So what's your perception on the Veterans Treatment Court, and how, and if you were fortunate enough to head it, how would you handle that?
So I think while shall is something that's a good idea, I think we have to be careful on shall. Only because when I was on the sexual assault unit, a lot of defense attorneys were putting veterans into that program. And I think that and the cases were getting dismissed, right? So because my understanding as veteran court is if you complete it, the case gets dismissed at the end. As a prosecutor, I think that concerned me, especially when I had crimes against children. Because I'm like, I don't know if that's a good fit for that. I don't think that crime and that court is a good fit. So I think that's why shall sometimes, maybe it shouldn't be, because I think now we're putting people in the program that I think we all can agree that may not be the best fit. Do I think Veterans Court is good? Absolutely, because of what you just said, right? There are people that come back that see terrible things, that they suddenly are trying to reacquaint themselves back into society. I mean, it's, similar to, I think, some of the things that some of us, we get desensitized to it. And you go out to dinner and you're with regular people and they're like, whoa, what are you talking about? This conversation went off the rails.
Right. That was a door slam. Did you just hit the ground there?
Exactly. So I think that when you have Veterans Court, I mean, first of all, if I were, if they entrusted me with that, I would want to tour different veterans facilities. I would want to know what else is out there, tell them. I'd want to study more about PTSD and learn about it. What are the triggers? How can we help them? Because the point of any court, like drug court, co-offending court, Veterans Court, is to help the person that's in the criminal justice system, because you don't want them in the criminal justice system again. That's why with Veterans Court, we dismiss the cases. Because the point is, you have served your country. We appreciate that. We want to help you along, and we don't ever want to see you again.
Dismissed
but for a traffic ticket, maybe. Kidding.
Dismissed and sealed after they go through their 18-month program.
And so I think what I'd want to do is I'd want to learn more about it so that way I could help them. Because here's the thing. well, we want to have tons of courts. And I've said to you that I want to have a court. At the end of the day, I also want to help people because it's a waste of time, resources, and money to put somebody through a program that does nothing for them, but make all of us feel good.
Do you have a specialty court that you would want to oversee?
Yeah, I want to start like a gang court. I mean, that doesn't sound good marketing wise. Everyone's like, what's that? And I'm like, but look, you have young people that come into the system. They have no services, right? A lot of them aren't educated. Like my dad couldn't read, right? So that makes it really hard to get a job. It makes it hard to go forward in life when you don't have the basic skills and tools to do that.
Was he in a gang?
No, he was not in a gang. He was not in a gang. But he just, in Hawaii, my dad liked to surf. And I think I was kind of a secondary thought. Which, that's life, right? You kind of deal with that and you move forward. But I think there are a lot of young people in this community that need help. They need resources. They need to be able to strive to do something more than kind of be a part of the gang and the head of it. It's great to watch the TV shows Sons of Anarchy and Mayans and watch different movies, but that's not real. Right? And it glamorizes a lifestyle that I don't know that we should hold on a pedestal like that. And so I want to be able to help those young people because I think when you're younger, not that you can't help an older person, but I think when you're younger, it's easier than if I go to somebody who's, 55 years old and say, hey, I want you to jump through all these hoops. They're going to be like, why?
Well, what's inspiring is when I see candidates kind of rise to the occasion based on their own personal experience that they had within family. Because we had Ray Spencer who sat there and who was the retired in May, right? Who was the head of the homicide division in Metro, talked about how his father went to prison for homicide. And I was like, wow, that is crazy. But it kind of like makes you rise up and try to make the world a better place. And for that, I give him a whole lot of props for doing that.
But it also makes you realize that other people can do it too. Yeah. It's a lot of hard work. It's, as I've said when I've been in court, this life is not easy to get up every single day and go to work and do what you need to do and, pay your bills. That's not an easy life, right? Sometimes it is easier for people, even though it sounds crazy, to be incarcerated because they don't have to make decisions. Decisions are made for them. And so that's the mold we want to break. We don't want you to pick that which is easy. We want you to pick that which is part of society because it's something that we all strive for. Sure, it's a dream, but I think that we can work towards doing that. Young people have a great opportunity in this country. I've traveled to different countries. Obviously, I didn't in the last 2 years, but I've traveled to different countries and I've seen how other people live. Sometimes I wish I could live in Italy and have a 6-week vacation where I went on holiday. But I also realized
your medical all paid for.
But I realized in this country, you have an opportunity. You have an opportunity where you can come from nothing and become something. And that something is defined by what you want.
And that's so crazy because that was one of the reasons I left the Marine Corps and went to the Army because I was really discouraged by the entitlement and the American civilians here who piss on this country and say that this country's bad, this country's terrible, but they haven't even left the country to visit other countries to see how it's really like on a global scale.
That's right.
And they piss on this country and me being a Jamaican born, I wasn't even born in this country and that really, really irks the crap out of me when people talk bad about the United States of America, But I see your point.
Listen, there are obviously things that are not perfect about this country. I mean, no country is perfect.
Exactly.
But the opportunities that you have, especially now, the opportunities that you have as a female, as a minority, need to be taken advantage of because you want to be able to, look at your representatives and see a mirror.
So, Ms. Chio.
Yes.
Why do you want to be a Las Vegas Justice of the Peace?
Because I think I have something to add to this community outside of what I've done for 19 years. I think my experience will help me. I think my life experience as well as my experience as a prosecutor will help me. And I think there are still good things left to be done.
And do you know Valerie Fuji, attorney?
Yes. Not well, but I know her. I've met her.
Have similarities.
Oh, thank you.
Facial similarities.
Thank you.
But did we cover everything that you want?
I think, yeah, we have. Do you have any questions?
I don't have a question. I have a statement. Steve was the one that really got me into really paying attention to judges and why they're so important. And I always appreciate Steve for that, because now I'm really, truly, I mean, Steve, I don't know if he's noticed, but I'm a lot more engaging with the judicial process than I used to be. But all these years that we've been doing these judicial endorsement interviews, I just want to say to you personally and to everybody who we endorsed, I'm very pleased with the group and the quality of individuals this year that have come out and want to run for judge. And I'm really starting to see what I've been wanting to see for years, a more diverse court. And that, I think that's always good for the process. And then I've just been really impressed with you and all the rest of the judges that we endorse on the depth of your knowledge and how much you guys care about the community.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
So I just wanted to get that out, because campaigning is tough. And usually you only field questions when somebody's mad at you. It's very rare you get a pat on the back like, hey, good job. So I wanted to make sure I got that in.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
And we're not easy on judicial candidates.
Yeah, I noticed.
Because like I said, they affect your life immediately on a very personal level. And the people that vote need to know what type of candidate that wants to sit on the bench or that wants to continue to sit on the bench. And that's why we really push the issue on judicial candidates.
Okay. And listen, challenge accepted.
Absolutely. Well, with that, Danielle Pieper Chio,
Yes.
could you please look into the camera and tell the folks why they need to go to the voting booth and vote for you, and your point of contact, please?
My name is Danielle Pieper Chio, and I am hoping to earn your vote. I have 19 years of experience in the criminal justice system, but I haven't just been a prosecutor. I've also worked across the table to help people. I've also looked at alternatives to incarceration. My contact information, you can go to my website. It's www.danielle4judge.com. And my email is danielle@danielle4judge.com. Thank you.
Thank you, Danielle Pieper Chio. Jim, thank you so much. Folks, that's Danielle Pieper Chio, candidate for Las Vegas Justice of the Peace, Department number 9. We encourage everybody to go and vote for this young lady. She's very impressive. We have endorsed her. We have put her through a vigorous interview process. And I'm not talking about this one as well. I'm talking about the endorsement process as well. And we really, really support her. And we think that she'll make a great addition to the Las Vegas Justice of the Peace. This is Steve Sanson, Jim Jones for Veterans in Politics. Until next time.